This week on the show, we are delighted to be joined by a guest coming to us from across the pond in America, all the way from Fort Worth, Texas. We have with us today somebody a little bit different than our normal kind of guests. It's, well, can I call you Hollywood actor, Julio Cedillo? Is that fair?
I'll forgive you. Remember, I'm an actor who happens to be Mexican, so the roles are a little dire sometimes, and I live in Texas, so. No, I'm very happy to be working in this industry as an actor. So I guess you can say Hollywood a little bit, yeah.
I mean, you've been in one of my all-time favorite films, which was Sicario. I mean, that's a pretty good film to be in. People would probably also recognize you from Narcos. You've been in all sorts. I looked at your IMDb and I realised you'd been in The Line of Duty, which is...
Well, The Line of Duty was it was a cop film. It was an independent cop film. So that's the problem now. I think,
people over here are
running out of titles.
Yeah. He says in the BBC drama Line of Duty.
Yes, I was there. I was in Wire in the Blood. That was a BBC show. Yeah,
That's cool.
That was an amazing show. Yeah, and they made their way to Texas to film one episode. So,
all I'm going to say is the roles I've seen you in have made me never want to mess with you, because you normally play quite a hard character.
Yeah, interestingly enough, people think that about me, but it's the magic of movies, right? I am furthest from that. I am the sweetest, nicest guy.
Yeah, we've had a few minutes before we started recording, right? And no offense. Obviously, I'm sure if we met in person, I'd be like, "Damn, this guy's a tough guy," but you seem very nice.
Yeah, if we were stopped by someone on the road. I would throw both of you guys under the bus and just, wimp out. No. I would take a punch, not a bullet, but I'd take a punch. Sure, why not?
Well, listen.
So
obviously,
intros aside,
the reason we've brought you on, Julio, is obviously you are not just an actor, but you are a very keen photographer, and that's something that. I read somewhere that you said that acting is my love, but photography is my lifeline. Tell us a bit more about kind of what it is that you do. Kind of, I guess let's start on the acting side, and then let's bring in the photography. So talk us through a bit about your kind of background.
Sure. So I was originally born in Mexico. I was born in Durango, and still considered the northern part of Mexico. And we moved here when I was about I was 4 going on 5. And so Spanish was my first language. And the reason I bring this up is because I learned how to speak English watching television, movies. My mother would sit me in front of the TV like every, mother with too many kids. She sat me she sat me in front of that TV set because, that's the cheapest babysitter. And I started watching a lot of old black and white movies. And I didn't know what I was watching, but I knew first it was in English, and second, I was in love with America. I was learning a lot of things, at least the perception of America through television and movies, right? So, and then also I used to mimic people on the tube, right? So you'd see James Mason, right? Hello, very nice. Lolita. I'd sit there and watch all this stuff going on, and I didn't realize that phonetically I wasn't losing, but I was masking my own accent, Mexican accent. And I was an extrovert, but I was more of an introvert because, again, I was still trying to learn to speak English, and I had a teacher who. In 4th grade, who gave me a series of little books to read plays. And that's when I knew I wanted to be an actor, because I was grabbing things from these little books and little sayings and phrases, which was basically dialogue. And then I would use that in conversation, and it would elicit all kinds of reactions and responses from people. But that was the beginning, and it allowed me to get out of my shell. After that, I was getting lost in those little roles as I would read, and then I started taking on plays. Anyway, make a long story short, Yeah, I wanted to be an actor, and I went to a engineering preparatory school. Should have been a civil engineer. That's I liked, physics, math, and science was my thing. But there was that little thing in me that wanted to just be expressive. I was an expressive kid to begin with. Anyway, so but I live in I live in Texas, in the northern part of Texas, and there wasn't a whole lot. There were movies and shows out here, but this was back in the '80s, late '80s. There was no internet. There was none of that. There was the Yellow Pages, and so I went flipping through the Yellow Pages and found an acting school, and I got myself into an acting studio. Literally a year after that, I ended up got a big role in a movie called Finding the Way Home opposite George C. Scott. And but I wanted to be a serious actor. I took it very seriously. I don't take myself serious, but I took what I do very serious. So that entered me into the world of acting, but I would have never thought, if we fast forward, I would have never thought I'd be doing this at this level and end up where I've ended up so many, many, many times. I mean, if you would have told me when I was a kid that I would be walking the red carpet at the Cannes Film Festival with Tommy Lee Jones and Barry Pepper and having EuropaCorp be the production company that takes us there, and that film winning 2 Palme d'Ors, I would have thought, you're bonkers. I don't know what you're talking about, So in a nutshell, yeah, I mean, it was just me. It was me figuring myself out in the beginning, learning how to speak English, and then it was discovering the culture in the U.S. through these books and movies and so on. But then there was that part of me that tapped into that part where, essentially actors are not all broken, but for the most part, yeah, we're all broken to some extent. It's not. Some people are traumatic, some are just the way we were brought up, and there's this desire to express yourself. And I think the art form, which includes photography, which includes cooking, which includes all of the art forms, that is in essence our lifeline, because we're just trying to have that release valve. Some people may not like their job, but they have something they're passionate about, and that allows them to cope. That allows them to push through life. And our jobs don't define us. Our art really does define us to some extent.
Well, I mean, one reason we were so kind of fascinated to bring you on is to kind of get this from this perspective from an actor's point of view, as somebody who sits on the other side of the lens and has to deal with that, but also somebody like yourself who has their own opinions and vision and interests when it comes to the visual medium. How do you find working on set with cinematographers? I mean, if we go back to Sicario, obviously, Roger Deakins, like absolute legend, and somebody who most photographers, I think, if they did know any cinematographer, that would be somebody they would have heard of, and somebody who really kind of defines that level of professionalism within the craft and the crafted image. For you, as a visually interested person, to kind of work alongside somebody like that must have been fascinating.
When I began my career as an actor, I think, and I say this a lot when people, ask me questions about my career in photography. To begin with, when I began my career on a set, I was just happy to be on a set. I was just, we're humbled. We're like, oh, thank you. You get this humble approach, and I believe in humility, but not on a set quite like that. Because what happens is that you don't want to bump into the furniture, you don't want to interrupt anyone, and really the reason we're hired, whether you're a photographer or actor, you're there to give your perspective, your vision of what you see. And it's not a right or wrong thing. It's just that you have a certain vision that is unique to you. And so why wouldn't you exercise that on a set? Why would you not go on there and pay attention and go, no, why don't we put the camera here? Which is the hardest thing, by the way, when you're about to shoot a scene. As photographers, you're looking for the quality of light. Either you fabricate it or you approach it. But then in acting, and especially on a set, you're trying to figure out visually the best place to begin the scene, right? How to make that happen. And there's no right or wrong. Everyone has a different approach. Every cinematographer has different lenses and cameras and the way they mechanically begin the scenes. And, and so for me, when I began my career, I was just glad to be on a set that I didn't bother the cinematographers. It wasn't, photography came to me only because when I was a very young kid, my parents didn't own a 35 millimeter camera. They had Polaroids, and they had this Kodak camera. They had a little disc, which was like a 8 millimeter photographs on a little disc. It was weird. It was a weird little camera. And so a lot of my memories, a lot of photographs, I have very few photographs of me as a child. I have very few photographs of us really doing a whole lot, but those Polaroids are sacred. And they started fading. And so when I got married, I knew, oh my gosh, so my desire to learn photography was to document my life because I didn't have that before, right? So once I was on a set, I wasn't thinking of photography. I was focused keenly on my acting. But with time, I began to understand on set, everything started to unfold for me because I did have a love for photography, but I wasn't marrying it to my acting because I was just focused on the acting. But it was once I got on the set of The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, the film directed by Tommy Lee Jones, and the one I just mentioned with the can, I got to meet Chris Mingus, an incredible DP. He did The Mission, The Killing Fields, I think The Reader. He did The Reader, an incredible DP. And I remember I asked him one question. I said, "How do you approach a frame, a shot, when it comes to lighting?" And I was curious because he was using this massive softbox right above this little house that we were shooting a scene in, because that's all it was. It was just this massive. It was like a ginormous softbox right above me. And he just said, "Grab your hand and look at the shadows, spin around," And he was the first one who said that. And of course, now I'll go on Instagram and everybody's doing that. You know what I mean? But that's in essence, the beginning of me going, okay, I need to pay more attention. I really need to pay attention. And some cinematographers are unassuming. Some of them, most of them are very quiet. And there's a few that, there's different personalities, but for the most part, DPs tend to stand back. They don't make themselves a part of the big production. They're very quiet. In fact, Sir Deakins is very much like that. When we did Sicario, I never spoke to him on set. I've spoken to him more casually than I have. I just saw him here. He was here in Dallas. He was part of a 3-day event for him, and his wife is part of that cinematography team. She's a big part of what they do together. James, his wife, and but when we did Sicario, he uses a lot of practicals. He uses available light, and that's incredible to me. So over the years, I have paid attention. I've asked as many questions as I can, but in the end, it all starts to make sense. It's common sense, unless you're injecting something very visual, whether you're using gels or you're using particular camera moves. Anyway, so that's kind of, cinematographers are incredible. I have a lot of respect for them. They have a lot to deal with, and especially when it comes to weather. When we did Cowboys and Aliens, Matthew Libatique, and he's done a lot of work with Aaron Aronofsky. I have trouble saying that. In Cowboys and Aliens, we shot a lot of exteriors, and yet they would bring a big crane and they would have this massive silk that would just diffuse the heck out of a whole, western town, right in the middle of the western town. And then there's a lot of danger with that. In fact, we had an incident on set where there was a crane that was holding that massive silk, and this big gust of wind just came through and started lifting that silk, and they were all rushing to untie the ropes because it was going to topple that crane. And a young PA who didn't know any better, not her fault, she was just trying to be helpful. Her first instinct was to grab the rope, thinking, and it just sliced through her hands, and it picked her up in the air and dropped her. She must have gotten up about 20 feet in the air, and ended up in the hospital. So it's the jobs on sets, especially in filming. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of safety issues you have to contend with. You know, the wind, the weather. I mean, the weather is your enemy in many ways. And for anybody who's a photographer, I mean, you know, I use I've got an alien chrome 400 watt strobe, and I've got 2D. You know, I've got 3D1s. When I should have waited. I bought them too early. The bees came later. You know, it's like it's horrible.
Right.
But I have these things, and I bought a battery pack. But anyway, just trying to shoot. You know, and you guys know, you know, being photographers, you better check the weather. You know, it's not going to work out. You better have, you know, plan B, C, and D, you know, and cinematographers have to do the same thing. Sometimes things are accidental. Sometimes the choices they make have nothing to do with them being artistic geniuses. They're just creating solutions for a problem. And I think that's where it's a good way to approach your work, you know?
So I've got three things, right? So number one, the weather is it is make or break on a shoot, especially on the bigger ones. The smaller ones, you tend to be a bit more flexible and you can kind of move around. But the bigger ones, as you know, especially if you're dealing with a ton. So I have the weather in every single place I look. So it's in my calendar or it's on the lock screen of my phone. And so I know, hopefully, up to the minute, what the next week of weather is going to be like. So as soon as I see rain, I'm like, oh, okay, we need to make a plan B, stuff like that, right? But the other, I had two questions. Well, I had a statement, really. Holy hell, the wind on those big silks, right? I remember fighting the wind on a little softbox, and I remember we were on top of a helipad, and I came off and I just said to my assistant, the first thing I was just like, imagine if that, because those silks, most people never see them, but they look like they're half a mile wide. And I
First
know
of all, right, imagine yourself on a ship.
A sail,
you know,
yeah, exactly.
On a sail, right? Or like a ship, like with pirates. You know, it's like I mean, you've got this massive thing that's doing its thing. This is how they traveled across the water. Of course, it's gonna, you know, yank
the
you up.
The slightest breeze will just kind of move the thing. I have seen some very cool ones that are kind of like balloons that are filled with helium.
Yes,
and then they kind of they seem to just float above the set, and they look amazing.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, because in Narcos Mexico, when I played a federal police officer in Narcos Mexico, season 1 and 2, and man, they were flying us everywhere. We'd finish, you know, scenes in Mexico City, go home to pack a little suitcase and just get a little bit of rest, and then we're on the plane early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, flying out by then. And going to Puerto Vallarta, and you would think that in Puerto Vallarta, this is where you're going to go, you know, spend some time by the beach. No, they flew me in for one day to shoot this big long scene at night, and then fly back to Mexico City. And I remember going out to the pool area where we were waiting, and they had a balloon. They had that same massive balloon with helium that lit up the whole exterior of that area, and it was beautiful. It was just beautiful to see that. But in essence, that's I don't know what they're called, China balls, I guess. They're you know, they're just sort of diffused balls of light, you know, and but to see it that size, that was the first time I'd ever seen one like that, you know, quite that big. They usually have the small ones.
Yeah, right, like 20, 40, 60 inches. But
and they follow you with it. They'll follow you with it like a boom. They're booming that light, and they're following you along, you know, and that constant light. Or I've seen guys where we're walking and they're bouncing reflectors on us, you know, as we're walking with them.
Well, just like a bit of foam core or
and so I find that fascinating. I think you know, the thing about being a photographer. And the reason we're speaking today, and I really appreciate you guys inviting me, is because the reason I use photography on set is because, one, I love it. Second, I was on a movie called Problem Child. I was an extra when I just began as a young actor. I didn't do much extra work, but I only did extra work on 3 movies. And it was a movie about a little young boy who was a problem child. And I was an extra. I played I was a musician in a circus band.
Okay.
and so you didn't see that coming, did you?
No.
Anyway, so we would break for lunch, and I met these little people, you know, and the sweetest people. And by the way, you know, I didn't know any better. I would have called them midgets. I would have called them dwarves. I mean, all of that is wrong. I mean, you know, that's wrong. That's not what you call people.
Sure.
But it was a family of them. There were 3 of them. There were actually 4 of them. There was a mother, father, and a daughter. And then their other daughter, who was the youngest, was actually, you know, normal height.
Right.
The other 3 family members were little people. And we were having lunch, and the mother was asking me all these questions about, you know, why I wanted to be an actor, and I went on. And I had already done one movie with George C. Scott called Finding the Way Home prior.
Okay.
And she was asking me at that moment, she said, did you take any photos on set? And I said, nah, I mean, no, not really. She said, you should. And I said, why? Like I said, I got to focus as an actor. She said, the photographs are not for you, my darling. They are for your future children. They are for, you know, are you going to have a legacy? Do you plan on doing big things in your life? And that's when the lights went off, you know. And so...
What on set?
What? Yeah. Well, on set. Yeah.
And someone flipped the breaker. All the lights went.
Like, what the hell happened? Oh, it just meant we had to get back to the circus act.
Yeah.
No, so seriously, so
that's
from
right,
that point on, I carried a camera, and then what started to happen, and it was true. That is when I'm on set, I don't talk to actors about acting. I talk about photography. Because a lot of actors love photography, and a lot of actors are they will whore themselves out to any photographer because they love being photographed. You know, if it's a great photographer, you know, and that strikes up conversation, and not just about photography, but the kind of photographers we're talking about, whether they're war photographers, whether they're documentary photographers, portrait photographers. You know, we can run the gamut, all kinds of topics. And then as I show them the photo, and I also give them as gifts. You know, I would print them sometimes, and then with time I email them these beautiful photographs. I did a movie just recently called A Million Miles Away. It's a film on Amazon. It's on Prime Video now. And I play the father of this young boy who eventually becomes an astronaut based on a true story of a man named Jose Hernandez, who was the first migrant farm worker to go to space, you know. And on the set, I was taking photographs, and I'd send them to the director and the actors, and you ingratiate yourself, you know, and they could see your artistry too. But my fast rule is when I get on a set, I don't pull out the camera right away. It's like with any of your subjects, right? They have to know you first. You have to prove yourselves to them. You know, when you go on a ranch and photograph cowboys, which I've done, you don't pull out the camera right away. You hang out with them. You get on a horse. You show that you know what you're doing a little bit. I'm not going to also lie that I've got great horsemanship like they do, but I have respect for them. I take my time. I want to know more about them. And the same thing for me on set. You know, I'll get to know, okay, is this actor that I'm working with worthy of, you know, having that exchange? And really, it's the opposite. I have to earn my stripes. And I always try to knock out 1 or 2 big scenes before I pull out that camera, so they can see like, oh, this guy's a real actor. This guy, you know, he's one of us, or he's very focused. And I don't want to come across like an amateur the minute I show up on set. But once I prove myself in a couple of scenes, then I pull out the camera.
I mean, this is fascinating because both of us have worked with actors in front of the lens when we've been asked to photograph various people for work. One thing that people always say with actors when you're photographing them is they find it very different to being on camera. And it's almost like, you know, when you're at work, you'll get given a role, you get given a character, and you inhabit that role. And then the thing about photographing an actor for, say, a magazine, is that sometimes there is no role, there is no character, and that can be a bit tricky. I mean, what, in your experience, do you think that it's a different, not skill set, but a different approach, you know, because suddenly the photographer kind of lays them bare in a way that perhaps they aren't used to on camera?
Yeah, you know, it's a tricky thing because I think what happens is that, you know, when you're on set, you know, we do have still photographers, right? We have these skilled still photographers who are amazing. Many of them who have to do too many things on set. Actually, they do portrait work. They try to grab shots that could be used for posters while you're on set. They're documentarians, they're portraitists, they're fine artists. I mean, it really runs all of that, right? And I don't think they get enough credit. But what happens is when you're on set, when you're working as an actor, you're being observed, right? You're not participating in that exchange with the photographer. They're there to capture you. It's like wild safari for them, you know. They're just trying to catch you in your element. But when you're having to be photographed formally for some purpose, whether it's, you know, typically it's marketing, then it gets a little bit, it gets uncomfortable because you don't have anything to do. But the new kind of actor has to learn now that it's a tool, that your image, in the same way when we do a scene, there's many philosophies, and I don't think either of them are wrong or right. I think it's just a matter of personal taste. When I'm doing a scene, it depends on what the scene is. If it's emotional, which I've done, it could be tough. I don't go back and look at playback just to see how I came across. You know, that just takes me out of my element, out of what I'm doing. You know, I can't be that self-aware. I have to be focused on what's being said to me, what's eliciting those things, because it's about reacting to one another. So I don't want to go look at it's almost like when people call it chimping, when you go up and down and look at your screen. You know, like don't look at your screen when you're taking a photo. Just be observant and shoot, right? That's the way it is in acting. But sometimes some scenes are not that complicated. It's more of a visual, right? It's more of the angle. It's more of what you're doing that's distracting. You know, you could be doing something with your eyes and you don't know, and the director will call you and go, "Hey, Kimberly, I want to show you this." And then they play back, and then you're like, "Oh, why did I do that?" Well, I don't know, because we're human beings. We do strange things. I really believe we have to be self-aware of that too, but it depends on the scene. But when you're being photographed, just being photographed, it sometimes it's best, in my experience, is to give the actor something to do. You know, and it's a simple thing as saying, "Hey, just kind of walk in place, and then when I count to 3, just turn around and look at me." Or give them something to visualize.
Yeah.
Actors need something to land on, right? Other actors don't need that. Other actors, they're very self-aware. In fact, many actors know what side, like I know what side I like to be photographed on, because my face structure, like I'm not symmetrical. Most people are not symmetrical, right? The people who are just beautiful, and they can take no bad photos. But if I shoot on this side, it's my softer side. If I go this way, it's a little bit more angular, right? And I know that. So I use that to my advantage when I'm acting. If I want to show a more menacing side, I'll turn my head, if I can. I mean, if the light is a certain way, then I can't. But I managed to do it for that purpose, because I know it's the way the light captures me. It's not just my acting. It's like I know what's happening with my body. But yeah, I think actors are self-conscious too. Some of them just they're disconnected. I remember, and I go back to this one because there's a documentary, a small documentary that was shot for the 3 Burials, and the film I mentioned earlier. And there's a wonderful photographer who is trying to get Tommy Lee Jones. He's taking portraits of Tommy, and he's suggesting to Tommy to stick his hand in this bush, almost like he's coming out from another world. And Tommy Lee Jones was very polite. He just looked at the guy. He goes, "Nah, no, I'm not gonna do that." That was it. Just a big no. And so you could tell that the photographer was struggling to figure out what to do with Tommy Lee Jones. And I think sometimes as photographers, sometimes that's the challenge too, right? What do you do with an actor? How do you get them engaged? And the reality is, I don't think it's about what you get them to do. I think it's just the quality of light. I think it's your color palette. I think it's where you put them. I think it's about shadow and light. I think we forget that sometimes. It's interesting to me because when I look at portraiture, especially with actors and really directors or anybody and since we're talking about the movie world, is like you'll have photographers who get noticed because of the people they photograph. But when you look at the photograph, you're like, well, that wasn't that interesting. But because the person is that famous, then it gets a lot of attention. But I admire photographers like Jack Davidson, who is a British photographer who does a lot of work for the New York Times. And he will play with distorting their faces. He will shoot them through mirrors. It's an artistry. Christopher Anderson, another great photographer, who does the same thing. It's just quality of light, So it's interesting because to me, I think photographers and cinematographers they're the same to me, because and this goes for a lot of filmmakers that I talk to. They are inspired by photographers, and photographers are inspired by films. And they go hand in hand. I mean, you'll see like and actors, the same thing. Did you know Jessica Lange is a photographer? Jessica Lange, the actress, is a photographer. She has a book.
I did not know that.
Yes, she has 2 books out, and I'm going to show you here on camera. Jessica Lange, Mexico.
Oh, wow.
Viggo Mortensen is a photographer.
Really?
Viggo Mortensen is a photographer. So
Jeff
many
Bridges
actors.
is.
Well, we know, and by the way, that is, and he's got 2 books, right? He's got 2 books.
Yeah.
So they're all have that exchange. When we were doing the 3 Burials, and I can talk about other films, but Tommy Lee Jones would reference Alex Webb, and in fact, when we were shooting, and this was back in 2003, they were going to have the Mexican photographer Graciela Iturbide to come out and photograph on set, and she is she's a national treasure in Mexico, and has been photographing for many, many, many years, and continues to be sought after because of her eyes, right?
Yeah.
And they had me. She was going to be coming out, and the producer Michael Fitzgerald had her on the phone and said, "Please, I need you to talk to her. Just help me translate a little bit." I said, "Okay." So I started talking to her. I knew who she was already back then. I knew who Miss Iturbide was, and so I was talking to her, and she couldn't come out because she had twisted her ankle, so she couldn't come out. And I was so disappointed because I wanted to meet her. And then a few weeks later, I go back to set. Most of my stuff was shot out. I had 1 or 2 more things left, and I went back to visit the set. And they had Alex Webb on the set. And I remember Tommy Lee Jones talking about Alex Webb's work. And his work was referenced during conversations about the 3 Burials. And there he is. We're in Lajitas, Texas, near Big Bend. If any of you guys like hiking and canoeing and all that great stuff, go to Big Bend. It's an incredible treasure of ours here in Texas. And it borders there, Mexico and the U.S. Anyway, and there was Alex Webb, but we also had a lot of rain. It delayed production, and he was there for I think 2 or 3 days, and couldn't get a whole lot because the weather just didn't. Again, back to the weather, couldn't communicate. And I have photographs of Alex Webb on set photographing Tommy Lee Jones. And then years later, Alex Webb was coming out with a book called La Calle, the Street, and it's photographs from Mexico. And he knew that I knew the writer, Guillermo Arriaga, who wrote the 3 Burials. And I put them together, and Alex included him in his book, La Calle, for short stories and essays and so on. Again, going back to what I said earlier, films will reference photographers, and photographers will reference films, And that's the beauty of photography. We've had photographers on sets, Ernest Haas, right? We've had Magnum photographers on countless of sets, from the Misfits to, we can keep going on and on and on. And so we have this beautiful relationship. It's there. And so I think when a photographer wants to photograph anyone or anything, I think the most important thing, and I take this from movies, is that, the word cinematic, everybody says, "Oh, that looks so cinematic." Well, what does that imply? Because even people making movies are like, what the hell does that mean? Well, in essence, what it means is, what are you saying with light and shadow? That's
the power of telling a story in an image, and an emotion.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
I really now want to watch this film.
Don't YouTube, because it literally will be people going, "Yeah, you wanted a teal and orange grade on all your footage. Just that looks cinematic."
Well, I asked Roger Deakins. I ran into him in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I went to go visit a friend of mine, there who's a filmmaker, and Roger Deakins was presenting his work at a little photo gallery. I think it's called the Hewlett Collection. Anyway, so yeah, I was like, wow, he's in town. I'm gonna go say hi. And when I got there, it was just him and his wife James, and his work was all along the wall. It wasn't even. They didn't even hang the work yet. They were going to do that. That's why Sir Deakins was there. And
Right.
And so when I got there, I was, and I hadn't talked to him. I mean, I hadn't seen him since Sicario. Now his wife did say something very nice to me when we were shooting Sicario. She came up to me and she says, you know, we saw the dailies and we're really impressed and really nice work. And let me tell you, I needed that. I needed that validation because I can go into later about Sicario, but Sicario was that scene that we shot in Sicario was not the original thing that was written. And in fact, I turned down the movie, and the scene that was originally written was a really crappy scene. And I don't mind saying it. I'm a very transparent person. And no offense to Taylor Sheridan, but that whole film was crafted by Denis Villeneuve and the rest of the cast. I mean, the structure's there, but the actual film itself is not everything that was on the page. Anyway, so the last time I saw James, you know, Deakins and Roger was on set. So here I am in Tulsa. And of course, I'm not going to talk about movies. I mean, the guy's a masterful cinematographer. I mean, you know, I'm just a fan. He is truly a craftsman, right? And so I'm not going to talk about that, you know, but I can talk about photography. And I started, because I have his book. When the book Byways came out, I bought it way earlier before it was even available in the U.S. And so anyway, so I told him how much I loved his book, but I didn't expect to see a lot of humor in his work. And in fact, I thought his book was going to be about his work on sets. No, it was just his personal work. And we had such great conversation. And going back to your point about the people giving you advice on Instagram or the internet about how to color your films, I said to him, do you find that a lot of filmmakers are just, everyone's copying each other? He goes, yeah, that's a problem. Which is why he has his forum, which is why you can go to his forum where you could look up all the lighting schemes and diagrams of the films he's worked on.
And he still responds to people, doesn't he?
Yes.
Like, regularly, and it's amazing that, you know, you can reach out to somebody of that level and they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember on that film we were using a cord of silk and you know, this head on that, you know.
No, without a doubt. And I think that's
awesome.
It is, and I think, you know, and I know we're going in different areas, but I think it's important for any of us, whether you're a photographer, actor, whatever your passion, whatever your craft is, if we come at people with respect, we will get those responses. I mean, that's how I met David Allen Harvey. David Allen Harvey was a Magnum photographer, incredible photographer. I engaged with him talking about his photography. I stay in touch with Alex Webb still because of Instagram.
I want to go back to. I need to watch this film because Alex Webb is one of my all-time favorite photographers. I mean,
oh man,
his books in kind of set in Latin America, and David Allen Harvey did a lot of work in Cuba as well, didn't he? Back in the day,
yes.
You know, they have a similar
Mexico,
style of shooting that street work, quite wide, very strong sunlight.
Well, the way they layer their photographs, right?
So many layers.
So
we always
many
used
layers.
to say it was like the fourth dimension. Alex Webb was always like breaking the fourth dimension, just when you thought that it couldn't get more, like one more thing, like one more layer the whole time.
And you know that goes back to, you know, it's lyrical. You know, it's like poetry, right? And I think that's the thing that gets forgotten sometimes. That's why when we see films that are remembering to be photographers, I mean, I don't want to reduce movies to that, but I'm not, because the reality is movies are inspired by photographs. I mean, I don't know how many times I get sent a script and then they send me a mood board, and before you know it, there I am looking at, you know, photographs of incredible photographers, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's where it goes. So I think, and I also feel like with photographers, it's like you should never shy away from wanting to do something in motion, like truly attack that as well, because in essence, you are a filmmaker. You're just focused on that one frame or those frames, but in essence, you can be a filmmaker because you have that eye, and that's the hardest thing sometimes. What's interesting to me is when I get on set, especially like when we're doing with television, we do TV series and so on. Narcos felt like, every episode felt like a movie because they were truly paying attention to detail and telling a story visually. But then we have other shows that are just not great. They're just very basic 101 TV shows. And they're not creating art. They're not thinking about being artistic. They just want to tell a story in the fastest way possible. But if they just spend a little time being a little bit more visually captivating, that'd be great. But then you get in your way. By the way, that's the other thing. I've been on sets where, and this happens to photographers too, where they have this grand scheme, this thing they want to photograph, and then when they're on set, they're fumbling around their lenses. They really did. The light wasn't quite the way they wanted it. You're trying to make something big out of something very, what's the word? You should have come at it very naturally, but now you've made a big production out of it. And when we tend to use the word, excuse my language, if I say it's a shit show, you show up with all this stuff and that was the thing you got. It's like when they're setting up. Thank God for drones now, because back in the day they would set up these crane shots, and they take all day to set them up, and before you know it, they're running out of time because of the union rules or the light, and then they bring actors on and they disrespect us because they want to rush us through the scene because they want to save money, or they're going to get in trouble with money issues. And then I'm thinking, well, did that help you tell? Is this helping you tell the story? That one little crane shot? That's just ridiculous to me, And I feel like with photography, if you're limited with time, what are you trying to say? And that is in essence what the photograph is about, In fact, what did I just see recently? There's a book that I am blown away. It's called The Art of Kinfolk. And Kinfolk is a beautiful, every issue is beautifully photographed, and they talk with chefs, they talk with architects, designers, photographers, and so on. But you'll see beautiful photography, just beautifully done, beautifully crafted, And I'm struck by that because I'm thinking some of the imagery they're presenting is not complicated. It's just they understand light, they understand color, and they approach it very simply. When I go on set, by the way, when I'm photographing people, I used to take. My phone was one thing that I would rely on, but they were never great. The phones were never great back in the day. Though I do have to say, when I did Cowboys and Aliens, and that included, that was Daniel Craig, Sam Rockwell, Harrison Ford, Olivia Wilde. I can go on and on. Anyway, the only thing I had on set with me was my iPhone 4, and they put us inside this tent, and would pump cool air in there to keep us all nice and fresh because we had to shoot out in the kind of the desert. And I remember sitting there in these director's chairs. We all had our chairs, and I would look at all these actors. And by the way, I was the only unknown idiot in there. I wasn't a name guy in there. But you had all these name actors, and they're all in costume, and we're inside literally a softbox. We're literally inside a softbox. And the only camera I had on me, which is, they always say the best camera with you is always the one that you have with you, right? It was my phone. And so I began to photograph some of the actors in that beautiful light. And they had this Richard Avedon vibe about them. And I used 3 different apps to get to my final image back in the day. And then when I came home, I wanted to print those images. And there was a program called Genuine Fractals, and it would fill in the pixels. And that's how you could make big prints. And I have big prints. I made big prints from that software. Now it's embedded in Lightroom, and you can get Topaz, I think, could do that now. But with AI, right? But back then it was just filling in the pixels. And so for the premiere and the wrap party, or the wrap of that premiere, I had blown up these massive, huge prints, rolled them up, took them all with me to Comic-Con, because that's where the premiere was. And I was handing them out as gifts. And here I'm handing these, these incredible actors their portraits, in these beautiful prints using the iPhone 4. But my camera and I don't use the phone too often because it's very sensitive now because you can send recordings and photos now.
Yeah.
So it's not great. But if I pull out my Fuji X-T1, that's the old one that I have. I have the X-T5, but I use the X-T1. I would wrap black gaffer tape on it to make it, and then rub the edges of the tape so it would look beat up. So when I was on set, it would still look vintage, and then when I went out into the street, it would look like a piece of crap, but it wasn't. It was just black gaffer tape. But my camera of choice is the GoPro.
What?
Because, yes, and here's what happens: if you put it, you can shoot in RAW format photographs. And now I have this.
So shocked, he's turned his camera off.
Yeah, he just pixelated. Yeah, we short circuited him. Yeah, no. So what happens is this GoPro, when you shoot in RAW format, you have all that canvas now. Now it's incredible when it's in when you're in bright light outside. Now when you go inside, then I'd have to go into it and mess with the settings and try to get it so but I don't. But usually when I'm outside and we're shooting stuff outside, I just go with my GoPro because it fits real neatly in my pocket, and it's unassuming. I don't have to futz with the aperture or anything. It's all automatic.
Okay.
But when I get back home, I'll just pull it up in Lightroom and then I'll flatten it and then I'll crop it the way I wanna see it. And I also take videos with it, and then when I send the photographs to everybody, they're blown away because I'll convert them, I'll process them in Lightroom, and then every now and then I'll pull out my film cameras, but those aren't as easy because they're too big, they're cumbersome. Where do I put them? I gotta have somebody babysit them when I'm walking on set.
Sure.
And then I also have to be careful when I use them because I don't want people to think, oh God, this guy's he's a fanatic over here. He's not doing his job. I want to be respected, as an actor, not so much. I mean, a photographer.
Of course. Is it awkward when you bring the camera out? Obviously, I know you've talked about kind of obviously not bringing it out initially and kind of getting everyone used to, and obviously introducing yourself and your passions. Do you need to get clearance, or are people cool with it? Just do it.
No, I rather ask for forgiveness than for permission.
Right. Okay.
So what happened? Well, for one, when I pull out the camera, I'm part of the team, right? At this point, because like I said, I knock out a few scenes before I even pull the thing out, so they can see that I'm a serious actor. I'm there to do what I'm supposed to do. They take that all in, and then when I pull out the camera, I'll pull it out at times when I think it's appropriate because I still have to make sure it's appropriate. I don't want to pull it out when we're doing very intense, scenes or whatever. Or there's a lot of tension in the room. I don't want to pull that out because I just don't want to set anybody off. So I know when and how. But then what I do is then I email them the photographs and I'll go straight for the director. I'll photograph directors first. Because when they see me pull it out, they're the first ones that would say no or yay, right?
Sure, get them on board. Everyone else falls in line, right?
So so what happens is, look, and I don't do this on purpose, and it's not because I think I would never say I'm a good or bad. I don't know what kind of photographer I am, but people like my photographs. But I've had producers come up to me and say, "Hey, we really like your photographs. They're a little bit better than our still photographers." Then that's when I cringe because I'm like, that wasn't the point. That wasn't the point, But then that's it's not my issue because I'm just an artist sharing my artistry. But no, and I've gotten to where I also get people to let me take their portraits, right? But then also the beautiful thing about working as an actor far, far away somewhere where I haven't been is not just what I do on set. I also go do street photography. I do a lot of it. And so going back to that lifeline, when I'm away from home, I miss my family like all of us. You all travel, right? And to not allow my mind to wander off and, sort of kind of dig myself into a hole mentally because, I'm away from home for a long period of time sometimes. Sure. That it just helps me stay in tune with my humanity. Because photography on set is a way for kinship, But once I hit the street, it's more about the humanity. Where am I? Not just, I'm not a tourist. I'm not going to be behaving like one. I got to go see who lives here and how people, what do they eat? Where's their favorite spot?
Right.
And so I kind of hit the street that way.
I'd love to kind of ask you a bit more about what you feel compelled by when you're kind of, what for you makes for a compelling image, and what draws you to want to take pictures when you're on set, aside from what we've discussed, which was the idea of documenting your day-to-day life for a kind of future, relative or whatever. Is there must be times when you look at other people's work and you kind of have a visceral reaction, or you look at a scene and you have a visceral reaction that makes you want to take a picture. Can you pinpoint what that is?
Well, there's several things, because when you're on set, most of the work is done for you, because we have production designers, right? That create an environment that's, either very real or you've never been in a place like that. So there's tonality, right? There's tonality in how the sets are painted and the way they're constructed. And just putting an actor in front of it in costume, that's all you need. You don't need to do a whole lot, right? But it's not just the actors, it's also the extras. I mean, I have photographed extras. And I eventually want to make a book called My Real World, My Real Life, on a play with real, right? REEL and REAL, right? And so when I'm on set, that's easy. It's easy for me to be compelled to take a photograph, because I'm seeing the light's already been done for me. The people are already in costume. I just have to be in a place where I'm giving some kind of decent composition, right? And I'm doing it so quick that I don't have time to be methodical or think through it. I just have to be instinctual, shoot, and then just go home and see what I got. But when I hit the street, that's usually what I'm looking for. The one thing that I've learned as an actor that I didn't know when I started out as an actor, and certainly as a young photographer. In fact, it's taken me a long time to say I'm an actor, in the same way that it's taken me a long time to say I'm a photographer. Now I can say that, because I think I'm in that headspace now, profoundly. But when I hit the street, the time of day, right? The time of day is very important. Is it early in the morning or late in golden hour time? Is there light coming through a certain alleyway or a certain street? I have been on streets where I'm looking at light going, man, that's just so gorgeous, but there's nobody in it yet. I need people in it I'll wait around. I'll wait around until somebody walks into that light, and I'll take a shot. And if I find somebody very intriguing, I will approach them. I will approach them. In fact, when we were doing Narcos Mexico, there was a gentleman, a Mexican man. This is Mexico City. He was giving away these free newspapers, but there were communist newspapers called El Machete. Machete is the machete, right? Mm-hmm. And he had these sort of I guess they were velvety corduroy type pants, and he had this really cool jacket on him, and his hair was slicked back, but then he had this little moon painted on his forehead, and he had he had some kind of eyeliner on, but he was giving away this communist newspaper, and I just found him to be so fascinating, because he was a throwback. He just looked like a throwback. Yeah. And when I photograph people, there's two ways of doing it. I never take a photograph of a person in the street and run away. I have to own my photograph. I have to look at them. I have to let them know they exist. Because then it just doesn't serve me, and then they don't know what I'm doing, and then it just bad energy, right? So usually I'll walk up to somebody and go right away. I go with the compliments. I go, "That is an amazing jacket. Wow, that's beautiful. Where'd you get that?" And then that strikes up the conversation, and then I say, "Hey," I said, "I'm a photographer. I'm an amateur photographer. I do this for fun. Can I take a picture?" And I tend to diffuse people for the most part. Every now and then I'll get a no, and I'll respect that. I think that's important. Sure. But this particular guy was so awesome. So he was giving away paper, and I was like, but he had this look on his face like he didn't trust me because he saw me with the camera, And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, okay. So I walked up to him, And I said, "Is that a real news? Or is that a real publication, or are these old vintage that have been reprinted?" He goes, "Oh no, it's a real publication." And I started asking him about it, and then we had such a nice conversation about it that's when I said, "Hey, can I? I'd love to take your photograph." And he goes, "Yeah, hang on one second." He goes, I want to get some cigarettes." And then he was looking for his cigarettes, and he found the pack, and it was empty. And I know he didn't have enough money, so I said, "Hey, I'll get you a pack." So I went and got him a pack of cigarettes. And then as soon as I, gave him a pack and gave him a cigarette, he was mine as long as I wanted. But I also didn't want to do a photo shoot with him. I didn't want to linger with him. I just only took 2 shots. So when I approach people, going back to your question, Greg, is that it's the way the person's dressed, their vibe, where they're situated. And I don't mind engaging the person on the street, where I like their aura, because it's an aura thing. But I got to move them away from the distraction. So I put them behind, there's got to be a wall. There's got to be something where I isolate them, but I don't direct them fully unless they're doing something very strange. But for the most part, I let them be as they are, but I will definitely walk them somewhere to take a quick photo. But it is quality of light. It is what they're wearing. It is texture, tonality, the quality of light, even the darkness, the shadows, that kind of thing. So I respond to that, I think, because of my years of being on set, of understanding that subtraction of light is just as important as introduction of light,
Yeah,
Lovely.
no.
I like
Fair
that.
enough.
Well, nothing that you guys know. I mean, you guys definitely understand that. I mean, you guys are photographers, and so I would assume it's the same thing for you guys. Well, Greg, you did a lot of great work with the. I have 2 of your books that I adore. I love them so much. The 2 zines that I got from you.
Well, yeah.
They're
So this
incredible.
is full disclosure. This is how we kind of came to be in touch, wasn't it? Was I think you'd bought a copy of Gaucho's, and we started chatting on Instagram probably a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
and
That's how you and I met, through your work. Yeah.
It was fascinating to see somebody who was working, doing what you're doing, but with this like clear passion for photography, and obviously with the access that you get from being on set, you get a unique vision with that, But also, for me, it was fascinating to kind of hear from you in terms of how being kind of in front of the camera and then choosing to be behind the camera, how that all interplays, because of all of the the inspiration that you must get from seeing other people work, but at the same time being in front of the camera, and how that informs then how you direct people when you're the other side, etc., etc., etc.
Well, and I think as an actor, what it's done for me too is that I've been an actor for such a long time, and I remember the first day when I was being photographed by still photographers or set photographer on set, and I would say, "Hey, can I get a copy of that?" "Oh, I'd love to get a copy of that." I don't know how many times I would tell someone that. I never got a thing. I never got a thing. And so going back to my family photographs, I realized, no, I gotta own my own images. No one's giving me anything.
Yeah.
And by the way, it goes back to legacy. Now I don't approach things that way where I'm thinking, oh, this is for my legacy. Seems like an arrogance, but I don't come at it from that point. It is something I want to leave behind. But there's marketing. I'm an actor. I have my website. I had to create a website as an actor because people would say, "Well, what have I seen you in?" And I thought, "Oh my gosh, do I have to spell out my resume right now?" And it's the same thing with being a photographer. It's like, we're not insecure. I'm not insecure about my work. People ask something very special and meaningful, but they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear the whole thing, the whole story. And I get bruised every single time because I love what I do, both as an actor and as a photographer. So for me, it's just easier to go, "Oh, I've got a website. You could go through it. It's fun. It's a lot of fun, a lot of pictures and a lot of videos, And it's just easier to brush people off in a certain way without being rude, because I'm not really brushing them off, but it's a way to protect myself and then to also let them indulge if they really care about the question they asked about. And my level of photography now is to the point where, my website does look great. I'm not a typical actor. When you go on my website and you click on every one of those movies that I've been, or TV shows, it's an experience, because you get to see behind the scene photographs on set along with video, and most actors don't have that. They don't have that luxury because they haven't nurtured that part. And
I have to say,
so it's also a mental health thing.
Sorry to interrupt. It was to go back to Jeff Bridges that we mentioned briefly earlier. I was always so surprised when I discovered that on that there was a jeffbridges.com website, and B, that there was a special page that was all about wide luxes. And if you go
gosh,
it's literally like a little wiki page almost about this camera that he shoots with.
Well, and they're bringing it back. They're like doing something with it now. I think there's a new. I think I just saw that recently with the wide lux camera. I think it
sounds familiar.
He's involved in that.
That's amazing. I mean,
well, he was a huge inspiration for me back in the day too. I mean, when he put out his book Pictures, with the wide lux camera, at first I thought, well, that's not a Hasselblad X-Pan. It's got a little curvature to it, and they're incredible. And then he came out with his second book. But I remember seeing his work at the Rose Gallery in Santa Monica, and incredible. I mean, he's been photographing for so long. And there are a lot of actors who do that, but not quite the way he has. I think he's done such a good job of sharing that with the world and then publishing, his books. It's beautiful, and I feel like part of the photography now, we're seeing it everywhere. A good example, Netflix have a magazine that they publish. It's called the Q. Netflix Q, and I've got every issue because I signed up early, and the amount of behind the scenes photography now, I mean, like it's taken off obviously now because of social media, right? When you because we all want to pull the veil back, we all want to see how something was done or shot. I think that part of it for me as a photographer, I love it, but as an actor I don't, because it gives away the mystery.
Sure.
But also the mysteries kept people out. It has shut people out, There's so many wonderful photographers and filmmakers. I'll run into photographers who transition into filmmaking, and they feel insecure. They feel like they don't know what they're doing, and I'm like, no, you have to understand you're on the right track, because it's been such a mystery for so long. People don't share how the process, because it's a process, right? And I think it's important for the young people to understand that no, you're looking at social media and short-circuiting yourself because you're comparing yourself to these great photographers or these great filmmakers, and don't do that. You come at it from your gut, from your visceral gut. There's so many wonderful films you should watch that's going to inspire your photography, but just tell your story through images. And the reason we're so captivated by all these wonderful movies is because they came at it with a photographer's eye. I mean, look at Matthew Libatique. He did it was a Requiem for, I can't remember. It was a film he did with
Requiem for a Dream.
For a Dream,
Requiem
yes.
for a Dream.
Requiem for a Dream.
Wild film.
Right? And the way the camera was sped up, all those inserts, the extreme close-ups. It's just about it's just art. It's artistry, and I think that's important for young people to understand that so many people, no matter where you come from, who you are, this industry has been very, sort of enclosed. And now we want to see how things are made so we can deconstruct it. Deconstruction in the same way we deconstruct a photograph. I don't know how many Instagram accounts where they're deconstructing light, now they want to show you how to film and do this and that. But so it's the more we share, the more we help ourselves too, and the more we help others. But I think it's about getting to that point, where let's just not make it also that important. It's just, it's simpler than we make it, I mean, I know where Richard Avedon was a photographer that I love so much, but then I discovered David Bailey, and I'm like, wow, he was also doing that white background. After a while, I mean, Richard Avedon took off because of his In the American West imagery, but he had been doing portraits like that in the studio much earlier. But then and then speaking of movies, his assistant, Laura Wilson, her son, Luke Wilson and Owen Wilson. I mean, she has her own body of work now. She's incredible. Wow. And she's been on sets, Wes Anderson sets, photographing the actors, of the Royal Tenenbaums. I mean, she's been photographing her sons on movie sets for a long, long time. You know, when I was on the set of Narcos, the set photographer is a incredible photographer named, and I've met two separate ones in Mexico. This gentleman's name is Carlos Somonte, and he did the still photography for Roma, the Alfonso Cuarón film.
Oh, wow.
And oh my gosh, and he's a powerhouse photographer, and he's done commercial work, on a lot of film sets in very incredible films in Mexico. He's part of film history because he's been on so many sets. There's also an incredible Mexican photographer named Daniel Daza. He has photographed so many incredible movies. One of my wonderful movies that I love was Before Night Falls, the Julian Schnabel film. And Carlos Somonte was on that set. He also photographed Benicio del Toro and Che. And so those become my pals, you know. When I go on set and when I see a still photographer, I approach them and I go, "Hey, have you heard about this book?" And they're like, "No, what?" And I'll bring them a book. I'll gift them a book, or you know. And so it's a beautiful exchange, man. And I think that's the beauty of photography, you know. I think coming at it with a sense of purpose, but with your own style. Don't take yourself so serious. And really, the best camera that you have is the one that you have with you. You know, it's not the camera. I mean, I've never heard anybody say, "Hey, these cookies are amazing. What kind of oven are you using?" You know.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I used to get asked all the time. They were like, "Oh, what camera do you use?" And I'm like, "You wouldn't ask a chef. You just wouldn't ask, would you?"
No, unless you're the sous chef. You know, unless you're in there, unless you're chopping, you know, veggies
Where did you get that knife?
Yeah, where'd you get that knife?
Sure
mine is so dull, you know. I mean, the thing is, when you're part of the circle, that's okay, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
But you don't come at people with that, because it is disrespectful. It's almost like saying, I think I can do the same thing with that thing you've got in your hand, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, man, no. If I had a pencil, I could draw it for you.
Do you know what's happening right now? Every single person who's listening is going, "Oh yeah."
Yeah, everybody knows that. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, I don't want to then bring it back to cameras, but very quickly, finally, because we did mention this a little bit earlier, the Hasselblad X-Pan. You were talking about shooting with that. Do you have one?
Yes, I have in fact, when I did A Million Miles Away, I have some on my. So I have an Instagram account for my actor account, where I keep everything actor related, and I had to separate my photography from my actor account because I felt like I wanted to give special treatment to my photographs, you know.
Yeah.
So I decided to create my own Instagram account, Julio's Photos. And photos with an F, not a PH. Yeah, and so there, I've shared a few Hasselblad images that I've taken with it. But you know, and I think I said this earlier. As an actor, when I'm on set, I have to be careful because I either have to have somebody watch my camera when I got to go in and do a scene, or if I have it with me, I have to make sure I don't drop it, or I'm not, I got to be very, and I love my cameras. I don't want to beat them up. I would love to shoot more with my Hasselblad, but it's just too cumbersome. It's like when I had my 5D. I still have my Canon 5D Mark III, but that thing's a monster now compared to everything else, right? And so the XT1, I love my XT1. I have an XT5, but in the end, it is my GoPro because I shoot it in RAW format. I will have the XT1 with me on set. I managed to lug it around here and there. If I want to do portraits, I'm not going to do the GoPro. But the GoPro is really nice for real wide documentary, really cool shots, you know.
And like you say, you can just chuck it in a pocket.
Yeah, and I shove it in my pocket, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think a New Year's resolution, though, for you and for me, maybe we can set this together as a bit of a challenge, is that we both need to shoot a bit more with the X-Pan.
Oh my gosh, yeah. In fact,
come the end of the year, we can have a little bit of a comparison, see what we've done.
Well, listen, your work is great because you were in India? There's a body of work you shared early on when I discovered your work. And it was printed. I think Huck might have been also printed your work on with the Hasselblad shots.
Okay, and I was shooting with the wide lux. I shot with a lot with the wide lux back.
Oh, it was the
yeah.
wide lux. That's what it was.
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
the
yeah.
wide lux. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, those are beautiful. But you know, it would be interesting to take that X-Pan and shoot with a strobe. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already challenging enough. You know, let's just keep adding to it. You know.
Yeah, steady on.
Didn't I just say keep it simple, stupid? Right? Didn't I just say that earlier? Right?
Does it have a hot shoe? Does it have a like a sync socket?
Yeah.
It does, okay, right.
So it's basically a rangefinder. So you can actually hit a switch on it and shoot normal 35mm frames.
Oh,
and then
cool.
hit the switch again, and it will expand out to being a panoramic.
Yeah, it uses two full frames. Two frames.
Yeah.
Nice. That's very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So yeah, okie dokie. Well, obviously we could talk all day, but we have to bring this to a close. I want to ask you our final questions, which we always ask our guests, which are we've probably covered this, but your desert island camera is, and then your desert island photo book.
Oh my gosh, that's hard because, you know, I actually own a speed graphic. I have a speed graphic.
Oh wow!
And I think I've taken maybe 8 photographs with that thing because it was just so cumbersome. But I love it.
Probably cost you about $500 for the
photos.
photos.
No, I think getting them just scanned or more than the camera. You know. So, oh man, I would say between two, because if I'm on an island, right, I'm stranded, right.
No, there is a lab on the island.
There is a photo lab on the island. Okay.
Yeah. You can pay in shells.
Okay, yeah. I'm really good at making some ceviche, exchange for some prints. Well, you know what? I probably would have to say GoPro. I know this sounds so anti whatever, but I can go underwater with it, right? It's going to be weatherproof. You know, it's going to get beat up, and I'm okay with it. And they're getting better and better now. Mind you, this is, you know, if I'm in the elements, right, on an island, I would probably go with the GoPro.
Okay.
And then I think what else? My phone would have been the other one, but then I could call for help.
just so we age this episode, what model of GoPro is it?
Oh, I hate these.
I don't know where they are now.
Well, I hate this company because
15, aren't they?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I have a 10, and I thought I was done, and they want to suck you in, you know. And it's like they're dang. It's like the in the U.S. government. They use military technology that they keep introducing. They let society have the technology
eventually.
little piece by little piece, right? And I feel like that's the way these companies are. They've already got these cameras figured out, but they're not going to release them. They're just gonna tempt you, and you're gonna do that. So it's just best to hold out as much as you can. I held out on my phone. I have a 14, and I held out for it for a while. You know, I have a 14 now. I had a 11 for the longest, and before that, I think I had a 7 for the longest. You know, so it's like, you know, I don't want to jump in on the greatest and latest. And then what is that gear acquisition syndrome? You suffer from gas.
You don't need to talk to Tom about that.
No, I know nothing.
Yeah,
I know nothing of
someone.
gear acquisition
Do I
syndrome.
see gear behind you? Is that a new box that
about?
was just delivered? Yeah. So anyway,
Nothing to see here.
Yeah, nothing to see. So it would probably be the GoPro for sure.
Okay.
Cool.
Your book. What would your book be?
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's hard because
That's a tough one.
Well, because I have so, you know, like you guys probably. I mean, I think we all suffer from the same thing. I have so many photo books, monographs that I just adore and love. But I would have to say this one probably because he's a photographer that I also met on Instagram. His name is same name as mine. My middle name is Cesar. So my name is Julio Cesar, which means Julius Caesar. This is a incredible photographer who happens to be Mexican. His name is Cesar Rodriguez. He has a book called Montaña Roja, and it's his work. It's the Red Mountain. I believe MoMA has that book as well, and I think it was shortlisted for Best First Book Award this year. and he basically black and white photographs, and he's been visiting this little small village up in the mountains of the state of Guerrero in Mexico, where people typically would have planted corn or coffee or so on, and they plant poppies. And it's this tug of war between the farming communities and the drug cartels and the local government and so on. But the way he photographs them, and it's not about the cartels. In fact, the book doesn't even show any of that. What it shows is this farming community and how they live and survive up in the mountains. And there's such a beautiful way, the way he photographs them, because he's showing some of their traditions, the way they interact, the way they live. Their humanity is on full display. And it's an incredible book. And I think the reason I would have that book is to remind me of my own humanity if I was stuck on an island, actually. Because it's just approaching people with respect and dignity and coming from that place as a photographer. I think speaking of photographers like this, what's happening now all around the world, and specifically, and it's a sad thing for people of Israel and certainly the people of Palestine. I don't get into politics. I think politics destroys people. I mean, they're destroying people. But I think the humanity is having these photographers bravely documenting these things, documenting things that are hard to watch, but we must not ignore them. And I think Cesar Rodriguez, he's not dealing with war per se, but he is dealing with a war between the farming community and the government and how to survive. And so it's on full display in a very dignified, beautiful way. It's a gorgeous black and white book, and the way it unfolds is also gorgeous. It's just a gorgeous thing. And if you guys can get a copy, please do so. I mean, I have one of them. I don't have it with me, but
we will link to it in the show notes.
Yeah.
I've just had a quick look, and I'm already kind of trying to find out.
And it reminded me of the work that you were. Yeah, it's really well the whole zine thing, right? Because it's sort of, before the word zine felt homemade, which is partially true, but I think there's a whole artistry to it. There's a whole beautiful tactile approach to this work. I think it's just so much more elevated than it gets credit for. I mean, your work in Argentina, I love so much, Greg. I especially since my wife has family there. They're all from there, and I love that book so much.
Thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your kind of wisdom and experiences with us, because I think for a lot of our listeners, it will be a totally different kind of world that they inhabit, and something that maybe they've not had access to before, to hear from somebody who's kind of walked in your shoes. And some of your kind of words of wisdom there, I think, will really ring true with a lot of our listeners. There's a lot to take away from it. So,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you both. I really appreciate it. I'm a huge fan of your show, and I think there's a lot that I get from it myself. I think there's a lot to apply there, but to be able to engage and have this conversation about a process, and also to remind people that, we can all do whatever we set our minds to. I mean, photography is not, we don't have to complicate it. There's too many people complicating it when it's just an expression. It's a form of expression, Nobody owns that. We do,
Yeah. Well, listen, if people want to find out more, they can go to Julio's Photos. As you said, photos with an F is your Instagram handle for your photography. And then Julio's Cedillo. I'm always going to say that.
Perfect.
Wrong. Sorry.
Perfect.
Also, julioactor.com is the website that you were talking about earlier, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
So that this can get an overall. But we will link to all of this in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, the links will be below. All is left for me to say is thank you again for coming on, because we really do appreciate your time. And I really hope that 2024 is a good year, because I know that for actors as well as photographers, 2023 was a bit of a funny one.
Oh my gosh! Don't remind me.
So we're moving forward. 2024, right?
Yes, and congratulations on your baby coming up soon. Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, tomorrow. So, crikey.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with that, I've actually got to run to the hospital. So,
Yes, don't be late.
not exactly quite. But listen, Julio, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. It's been brilliant. Really loved it.
My honor. It's a complete honor. I can't believe I'm going to be on your show now.
Excellent.
Thank you very much for listening to the latest episode of the Exposed Negative podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by heading to our Patreon or doing one-offs. The details are on the website, and the Patreon is patreon.com/exposed negative. We'd love it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@exposed negative. And obviously, we're on Instagram, which is xnegative. If you want to follow us personally, mine is tombarnes.com on Instagram, as and the website. And then Greg's is @GregFennell, and that's FUNNELL. So, thank you very much for taking the time to listen, and hopefully you enjoy the next one.